Hello, welcome to the April 22nd, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through as expected. Hello, welcome to the April 22nd. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. All right, and let me just shut off I'll mute my other monitor. All right, so my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could either submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply enter your question in the chat field. We'll try to get through all of the questions in order asked. My ability to answer all the questions in a real-time nature will soon be eclipsed. I'll try the whole live stream to catch up. But if you don't see an immediate response to your question, then you may want to, if we could refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. It just kind of slows down the whole process. Also, when asking a question, if you could specify which version of Cubase it is, where it's like version 10, 10.5, 11, 12, or if it's LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that would be, that's often helpful. And we should have all of the topics covered in the live stream, posted in and pinned to the top of the comments field of the video later tonight. So it takes several hours. I'll take an hour break for dinner, and then I will go back and rewatch the live stream and kind of type them all up. So you could use that, and that will have the timestamp, so you could jump immediately to a particular question. If you wanted to search for questions that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to the website cubaseindex.com. And Jan from Stockholm is kind enough to be able to create that website as a wonderful reference. Also, I want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude, who does two different duties. So one is he does a lot of work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful service for different tutorials and a collection of different tutorials and information that's very relevant to Steinberg users. And Jazz Dude also, along with Agent K, will handle moderation of the live stream. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this to make it a better community and to work better overall. So with that, we will go ahead and see if we could get started. So let's see, our first question. Let me just... And I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching the live stream, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see where people are. Okay, so we have from Mark Davenport, it says, I emailed a question earlier this week about the Cubase IC Pro keyboard and SKI remote crashing the apps. Hopefully you got it and can address in the live stream today. So I didn't have any problems doing it, but what I saw some people, I did it on my PC, but if I wanted to come over to here, if we click on the plus sign and then we just do the SKI remote here, so I don't have, my son is homesick from school today, and he has my iPad currently, but when I go to type in a particular password here, I didn't get any crashes. So say if I just wanted to, I guess I just did on my Mac, but on my PC I didn't have any issues with that, but I don't have my iPad currently connected to my system, unfortunately, so sorry about that. But but I've seen some people that just kind of went through, and then as they would re-authenticate it there by typing in a password, that seemed to work. But let me know if it just functioned exactly like it did on my system. Sorry about that, it's kind of annoying. All right, let's open up this project here. Okay, so we just see a question And let me just check my routing. So next question is, hi, I cannot hear sound from the metronome. So if you are running Cubase Pro, one of the things that it could be is, let's say if I'm playing back my project and I enable the metronome here. So let's say if we're at the end, make sure that if you go to the control room, you may have to click on the main button here, but there is a metronome where you could turn the metronome on and off in the control room. And that you also have a click volume. So make sure that your click volume is up here and that's going through the control room and that it is turned on. So try those things and you'll probably be able to hear your metronome quickly. All right, so we see Benny from Sweden working in his studio. Thanks for joining us today. We have Soren from Sweden also, Rick France from Oregon. He's just saying it's a beautiful Friday in the Pacific Northwest. We have wonderful weather here today. Yeah. All right, so we have a question. I imported a MIDI file from another DAW and opened it in Cubase. What is the easiest way to convert those MIDI tracks to instrument track? How do I assign the instrument to those MIDI tracks? So probably, by default, the behavior the MIDI file will generally open up inside of Howling and Sonic SE3. But if you go to the preferences here, we can just go to you're under MIDI to MIDI file on import, and then you'll see destination. So here we could just have it automatically import to instrument tracks or to MIDI tracks, and then you could assign it to different instruments there as opposed to all the tracks being routed directly to the Howling and Sonic SE multi-timbral. So once again, go to preferences, MIDI to MIDI file, and then under destination, you could choose instrument tracks there. All right, so we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. It's 15 degrees Celsius and sunny, so sounds good. Okay, so we see, hello Greg, nice to be here. What Cubase version are you using right now for this live stream? So I'm using Cubase Pro version 12.01. So it's the latest version is available to users. So yeah, version 12.01 of the Pro level of Cubase. All right, we have Gerald Ely checking in from California. All right, and we have Immersive Audio NFT checking in from Akron, Ohio. And we have Mr. C Music Production 63 checking in from Australia. So thank you for joining us very late. And we have Ari from Israel. All right, and Benny just saying thank you for your help, Greg. Last Tuesday, I got all my questions. Everything is working as it should, so that's good. All right, so I just see Kenny just saying we want a full screen mode, please. If it's just with the with Cubase, if which operating system, that would be helpful. So, but it looks like I'm using kind of full screen here. So, I had someone that commented that they're looking for full screen where they don't want to see like maybe the menu options, and that's like on Mac OS, that's just going to be a preference in the system preferences. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see, what you mean by full screen. All right, we have Crocante from Los Angeles joining us. So thanks to being a part of the community today. Okay, so we have a question. With Cubase 12, how do you keep the track height consistent? Is there a way to set a default track height unless you choose one or more tracks to edit? So one of the things that you could do is let's say if we have a number of tracks, I think if you just hold down Control or Command, that you could resize kind of all of your tracks. And if you go to the Edit menu, there is a function for Enlarge selected track. So if we put that where we see the check mark next to it, so you just activate it anytime that you would select a particular track or tracks, those would automatically be enlarged. But if you want a consistent size for all tracks, all you'd have to do is just hold down, again, the Control or Command, and then resize while resizing from the bottom one track height, and you could adjust the vertical height of all of the tracks like so. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we have Emmanuel Morin from Quebec City, Canada. Thanks for joining us. And we have Don checking in from sunny South Carolina. All right, Jason Genova is wondering if other people are making dubstep in Cubase like he is. John Costigan wants people to hit the like button if you learned something new. All right, and we have Frank Langsfield checking in from Kingston, Canada. Jason Genova from England. Daniel from Mexico City, thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Chief Theodore, or Teddy, Ted just checking in from London. So, all right. All right, so I just see I'm still having dropouts during mixing. Will that affect the export? No. So as you're doing the export, it's not generally doing it in real time, so it shouldn't affect your export unless it's a plugin that's causing the dropouts. I mean, sometimes the plugins may be causing dropouts for performance. Sometimes plugins can cause dropouts as like a copy protection mechanism. Often trial versions, you may have a plugin that will just kind of shoot white noise during something like that. But if it's just for like I'm running out of CPU, when you export the file, you shouldn't have any issues with that. All right, we see Captenergy Music, who's just based out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All right, and we see Mark Rabin from Montana. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Kenny Jobson checking in from Durham in the UK. So I believe that's up north near Scotland. I met some people from Durham when I was on vacation in Barbados 9-10 years ago. Just remember that. Some things you can't understand why they stick in your brain, but that one did. All right, and we have Graver checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so that should dispense the virtual ice cream. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, when selecting 2 or more notes in the editor, for example, 2 violin parts in the same track, when I click on them, I only hear one note, not both notes. Yeah, so I think when you go to, let's go to a different project here quickly. Okay, so let's say if we are here. All right, so generally as we click on particular notes, so, you know, as you would select the note there that we hear it, what some people will do is just, if you just use like the left and right arrows, you can quickly navigate through the notes. but as we click on notes, it's going to just sound the particular last note that you click on. And since you can't really, so I think it's just going to do one single note at the time is the intention. And let's see if we just... Yeah, I don't think that there's a way of like scrubbing MIDI per se, but let's say if I maybe come... If I want to go to the in-place editor. So let's say if I just put this into like a scrub, I don't think this will work for MIDI notes. But you could go to scrub mode on your in-place editor, try that. But it's really kind of designed for, you know, selecting one MIDI event and then being able to hear that particular note. All right, and we see that Gareth has graced me by being the first person to join a Club Cubase live stream from Antarctica, and he's based today. He migrated to Admonson Scott Base, so we're glad that you can make it. And thanks for joining us and getting our last continent live. All right, so Robert from Atlanta is on, and he's already slapped the like button, so that's great. All right, so we just see... Okay, so we have a question from Matt Smith. Hi, Greg. Is there any way to configure Cubase so that when you set one event on top of another, it automatically trims out the space on the bottom event rather than stacking in a separate lane? So yeah, we could do that, and it's just called delete overlaps. So let's say if I have these two events, and now they're kind of stacked on top of each other. At that point, we're only hearing one. So what you could do is, if you wanted to come here, you could go to the audio menu. If you go to advanced, you could choose delete overlaps, but you could just do this as an editing preference. So if you wanted to go to editing, you could just choose delete overlaps, and this way you could apply it to both audio and MIDI. So now as we hover over, that will automatically delete the event underneath. So as I move this part on top from the left on top of the part or the event to the right, it'll now just delete the beginning of those events. So just go to preferences, to editing, and enable delete overlaps. And then that should do the trick for you. Okay, so a question from Captainergy Music. Can you create an instrument stack with effects using different instrument VSTs and export it to use in a different project? So let's say if we wanted to come here, I'll just quickly do a new project. So we could just, there's a couple different ways of doing this. So let's say if we add some different instrument tracks. Just move a couple things off my controller keyboard. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add okay, so let's say and I'll add one more. Let's just quickly add, let's say, a pad shop. Okay, so let's say now I wanted to come here and I have, you know, a stack. Just do a different quick patch here. All right, so if we have this particular stack, one of the things we could do is there's a couple different approaches. And let's say if we wanted to add an effects track to this, let's go ahead and put like a delay on these. All right, so if I wanted to, one of the things I could do is save these as a, so if I wanted to just have the particular instruments, I think just the instrument sounds themselves, we could save this as a track preset. So we'll come over here and we'll call it all right, and let's say at this point, if I wanted to import, let's just say we'll add track using track preset. So if I wanted to come here, that we could just now add the track preset with all those. If we wanted to take that with all of media as well as with the effects, we could choose to export the selected tracks. So we'll come here, let's export selected tracks, and come here, we'll give it a name. And then when we come over here to import track archive, we could just come right over here, and now we could import the track archives with the effects. So we could just do it like that. Also, if we wanted to get to the point where if we save this in a particular project, so let's say we'll save this project. And at this point we could, and let's say even if we have these all in a folder, so let's move these to a new folder, and let's go ahead and save this project. And now we could choose to import tracks from project, and let's go to our projects here, and then we could just import all of those. So we'll say, okay, I want to take this project, and now we could just say, okay, I want this folder to be imported. So at that point, we could just come over there and import those particular files as well. So there's kind of 3 different ways that you could create stacks just like that. So let me know if that's helpful. And thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, and we have Sandy Hot Fudge checking in from Conway, South Carolina. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so I see I guess chords are missing when I get the audio send to MIDI chord track. Please help me. So if you're trying to get like audio, or if you're trying to extract chords from an audio event, really all you need to do is, let me just find a project here quickly. So I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly. All right, so let's say if I just do like a new track version here. So I could just take kind of the guitar part. Okay, so it says missing when I got the audio sent to MIDI chord track, please help me. So if I just come here and just drag, and this is in version 12, that it will automatically just kind of create the chords for you. You could also select the event, go to project menu and go to chord track and say create chord events from the audio file itself. So let me know if that is what you want to do or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we have Eagle checking in from Nigeria, Nicholas checking in from a rainy Vienna. All right, and we have Andy Rooney checking in from Yorkshire, UK. So we have some other people that usually are on the live streams from Yorkshire. So thanks for joining. Okay, so I just see from Dallas LaRue. So I was having trouble rendering MIDI to audio in several tracks. I had to make several attempts before it worked. I would render a track with nothing on it. So, you know, if you could let us know if it's if you're using instrument tracks or MIDI tracks routed to a virtual instrument. Sometimes that can make a difference depending on the audio routing within the particular instrument. But it seems to work pretty consistently for me. And sometimes if you make sure that you have the event selected that you are rendering. All right, so we have a question. It says, I'm a bassist and guitarist and love to do articulate editing in a MIDI editor in Halion Sonic SE and Cubase 12 Pro. Do you think Cubase will add a fretboard to toggle from the piano roll? It's an interesting question. In all my years, I haven't been asked for like a particular fretboard because, the fretboard could determine, and it could be sometimes when you hit a note on a fretboard and many of the samples aren't taken at each fret position. So it may be hard to actually get a sense when you have the same notes that could be, represented. If you have a 6-string guitar, you could have notes that are represented on all 6 strings, if that's helpful, whereas the piano determines the actual pitch. So, it may not, I understand, like I'm a bassist myself, so I understand kind of the logic behind it, but for editing, you may not want the pitch indicated across 6 different strings for a guitar part, or, or 5 or 6, 4 or 5, 6 strings for a bass part, where you want kind of the same pitch to be indicated instead of, oh, this is the pitch that's on this particular string. How do you look for the particular string? Is that what the person was actually using? Is that what the sample is? Like the Steinberg electric bass has every note's played on every string sampled, but most sample instruments don't do that. So that could be confusing if you played, let's say, an open G string versus playing the same pitch on the D, A, E, or B strings. That has a distinct feel as well. So, and that may not be conveyed with that. All right, and we have Neo's test on. So thanks for joining us. Michael Teams is on fire distributing virtual ice cream. It's a nice spring day in America. All right, my time field just jumped. Trying to find my spot. All right, so I think I'm in the neighborhood. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, is it possible to reduce the size of MIDI notes and the space between them two in the same time? So I'm not sure if this is just visually, but let me go ahead and, so let's say if we're here. So I'm not sure if you wanted to just like reduce, like zooming in. So if we hit like Shift H or Shift G, or if you wanted to hit G or H, we could zoom in just like this. And there's also dedicated zoom tools. So if you wanted to just see like a particular range, you could do that and double click and go back. Or if you wanted, but if we wanted to kind of change the length of particular notes, we could just kind of go directly, and grab, select a group of notes and elongate or shorten the notes just directly like so. Let me know if that's what you want to do, or if you wanted to do even more like a time compression of particular MIDI notes. We could do stuff like, okay, I just wanted to take all of these MIDI notes and I wanted to play back in less time. You like to make the same notes play shorter or longer and kind of keep the relationships. If we change our sizing mode here to sizing applies time stretch, then I could time compress the event so all the events will play faster, or if I want them all to play slower, we could do stuff like that for the events on the project window. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, how to get a big heavy metal guitar sound just with Cubase tool. Can you give us an example, please? Here's a project I did. My friend Fred Corey passed on to me. So he's kind of a rock star kind of guy. Let me just find it. And he will sometimes lend me projects to use for live streams and demos. And one of the ones he gave me, he's like, man, how'd you get the guitars to sound so good on this particular project? And he had recorded just a DI of the guitars, but will give you kind of a sense. So as we're looking here, let's take the guitar tracks. So this is just going to be two guitars panned. And let's say if I just wanted to bypass the VST amp rack. So these are just the included, so if you wanted to come here, and let's say if you wanted to change different amplifiers. So these are the Plexi Leads. But you could have so, but just like in context. And I'm go, hit the road. Gonna rock, gonna roll. We got no control, hit the road. Gonna rock, gonna roll. So let's say we'll bypass both of the guitars. My snakeskin bag, my leather rags is all I ever need. Got a one-way pass, just got some ass and I'm out the door. So these are often used in, lots of different productions. I remember as far as kind of like software guitar amps go, Michael Wagner, who's kind of, one of the biggest producers and engineers of kind of hard rock and metal stuff from the 80s. He's a guy he's the one who mixed Master of Puppets by Metallica and Skid Row and King's X. That, he was this is his favorite software guitar amp, is the built-in VST amp rack. So you could definitely get great use out of that to get big, heavy guitar sounds. You see that Gareth took the one for the team just to go to Antarctica. So I appreciate it, Gareth. We hope you get back safely before winter creeps in down in the South Pole. All right, and we see Michael Pierce on the live stream. Glad to have you with us. And Michael's based outside of London. All right, so we see hi from South Africa. Just wish Cubase could have a monthly subscription to or rent to own. Can anyone help? So there's lots of people that will use credit cards to kind of do that and pay that off. But currently, as we've done research with different models, our customers overwhelmingly wanted to have a perpetual license. It's not to say that, there won't be perhaps other options available in the future, but we always want to have a perpetual license because that's what our customers have resoundingly communicated to us. But maybe you could start off with a Cubase Elements, and then as your needs grow, upgrade from there. So I know in the U.S., I'm not sure what the price is in South Africa, but in the U.S. it starts at around $100. But again, I'm ignorant of the price in South Africa. But maybe start with a lesser version and then kind of build your way up. And then as your needs grow, you can upgrade without any financial consequence. Okay, so we see from Best Korean Jesus. He's based in San Diego. I have a question about drum pads in Hallion. Is there a way to convert Groove Agent kits to be used in Hallion SE, or do I need a full version of which? So currently, the Groove Agent kits I don't think are compatible with Hallion directly. So if you wanted to do that, in it's often sometimes maybe not as required because, every copy of Cubase has a Groove Agent SE. And if you needed more Groove Agent capabilities, you could just get the full version of Groove Agent. But there's no way for Hallion SE or the full version of Hallion to actually just, import the Groove Agent libraries. They're kind of two different instruments. All right. So you see from Nauer Beats Musica. I'm sorry, I can't read the writing, the language. I apologize for being ignorant of your language, but maybe if there's a way to translate, I might be able to help, or if someone else is able to translate. Sorry about that. Okay, Nick is wishing everyone a happy Friday to the Cubase family. All right, so I just see, sir, please, audio to MIDI chord missing. So, I think if we just want to go back, that we just, this is going to be a Cubase 12 function. But again, all you'd have to do is, as we showed just a couple minutes ago, and I realize this might have been asked before we showed this, but again, I'm just going to take the chord here from this particular project. So we'll take the guitar part, and if we want to create the chords, all you have to do is go to your project menu, go to chord track, and create chord events, and it'll do its analysis and automatically create the particular chords for you, just like so. Okay, so we just see a question. Hi, Greg. In Score Editor, when in expanded page mode, there is no instrument list. If I want to see the score of another instrument without closing the score page mode, please help. So, the score page mode will show what is selected. So if I wanted to just come over here, we have some MIDI parts. So there isn't a way within the score editor. So the score editor is going to reflect what you chose to look at in the score editor. Let's see if this is going to... This project's going to load up. So let's say if I just have multiple events selected here. So if I go and look at multiple events, so let's say we have like flute, piano, and I wanted to look at this. So the intention is that we could see whatever is currently selected in the score editor. So that's kind of really the intention of that. So, just make sure that, whatever tracks that you want to see, that is what you look for. So select the event in the particular score editor, and then launch the score editor. It's not really intended to, from the score editor, select events. So you would kind of select the events before entering the score editor. So, so generally within the editors, it reflects what you want to edit versus selecting multiple events from a particular editor just as a workflow. It's a little less confusing overall. All right, so we see how can I set channel number the same way, but for certain number, I want to set the channel number sequentially 1 to 20 as example. Okay, so I'm trying to see if this is like for a particular, like as. All right, so let's say if we have a number, I'm not sure if it's with, so as I add, let's say like from a blank track, if I wanted to add 21 tracks, these will all be added sequentially. So I'm not sure if it's for MIDI or audio, but let me just, so how can I set the channel number same way, but for a certain number, I want to set channel number sequentially. So if you add them all at the same time, you could do that. But let's say if I wanted to now let's say add audio tracks, let's say starting at measure 15, I wanted to add 17 tracks. We could see that while the tracks may be carried over, that we could see like the actual audio tracks kind of just go sequentially in the mixer. So even though it's labeled as audio 15, the label would be audio 22. So let me know if you wanted to change the labels, the track names or the channel names, but it seems like you could just kind of add multiple tracks sequentially. All right, so we see Virus Studios wishing everyone a happy Friday. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. And we have Tarek Mansur checking in from Sweden. You always have a strong Swedish contingent. All right, we have Matt from UK. And Virus Studios is sending greetings from Germany. And Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, and we have Samson Strike from Austria. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. So I see from Nick. If people don't know, I just had my 30th anniversary with Steinberg this week on Wednesday. So Nick asked, congrats on 30 years, Greg. What has been the best moment and what has been the worst moment in those 30 years? So, I've gotten to help Paul McCartney. That doesn't suck as good moments. Spending time with like Hans Zimmer. And I remember like shooting the interview with him and he referred to me as a great educationalist. That was like just a huge honor. I've gotten to sit next to Stevie Wonder on the piano bench while he sings and plays piano. That was pretty spectacular. I got to listen to Chuck Ainley's mix of Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms in Mark Knopfler's studio when it came directly back from Bob Ludwig, and hearing it in Mark Knopfler's big room at British Grove Studios in 5.1, being the first person not involved with the project to hear the 5.1 mix of that was pretty spectacular. And in that room, he had an EMI Red 57 console and an EMI TG series in addition to like a Neve VR. So it was a pretty spectacular experience. So just amazing experiences. I've been fortunate, just helping Peter Frampton, who I was a huge fan of, my first big concert. Like in high school, I was a huge Jeff Berlin fan, the bassist, and it was probably because of him that I studied music and went on to become, be involved with music. So it's such a thrill when he calls for help, and I'm so proud to have him as a Cubase user, helping, just shooting the breeze with Alan Holdsworth, just talking about who he thinks is the best guitarist, and it's like, he's so amazing. Going to Frank Zappa's studio and working with Dweezil, that was an incredible experience. Being able to, I also worked with the Eric Clapton's Crossroads project, and I got to be an engineer on that, just kind of by total fluke, in Dallas, Texas, and we won Tech Awards and was nominated for an Emmy. So that was a lot of fun. Got to record Eric Johnson and all sorts of amazing guitarists. I got to record Eric Clapton. Being involved with that was amazing. As far as bad experiences, I don't, there's sometimes when it's a long flight. One time I was in Los Angeles, and I remember I just spent a couple of hours with Vinny Caluta at our office, the amazing drummer. And I was in Los Angeles, and I was going to be flying back that night, and I got asked to go to Hong Kong like that night. To do a demo in Hong Kong, which sounded exciting, except I didn't have my passport. So I had to fly from Los Angeles, where I could have caught a flight to Hong Kong pretty easily, but I had to fly back on a red-eye flight and grab my passport at home in Virginia to then go straight to the airport and fly back to Hong Kong. So that was a long day. And then I landed, and it was... while I was in the air is when SARS had an outbreak. So it was a fun trip, but getting home was kind of a bummer, because while that was going on, that's when the US invaded Iraq, and then there was like incredibly tight security at the airport where they wouldn't even let people go to the bathroom unless you were in an armed escorted group. It was really bizarre. But that's so sometimes a long travel, but I've been so fortunate to have incredible experiences. So, and I look forward to many more. All right, so we have a question. Explanation of VCA, Greg, please. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so VCA it's really kind of mimicking almost a particular workflow before consoles had moving faders. So a lot of early consoles, classic consoles, would do automation by adjusting the voltage control amplifier. So let's say if we had, let's see if this is, let me just find a different version of this, of these drums with some automation. So bear with me just a second. So when we want to use a VCA is often when dealing with effects, but it's really almost more of a particular a dealing, primarily with a lot of different instruments. So let's say my drums here, I have a lot of existing automation. And let's say on my snare, I'm going to add, like, let's say just a big reverb. Let's just make this. Okay, so let's say I have like kind of a huge big reverb on my snare. So what a lot of people do, if they wanted to control the volume of a number of different drum sources, is they could come over here and let's say send all these tracks. So select all these tracks, and let's say I wanted to send these to a group. All right, so we'll call this our drum group. All right, and didn't like that. Sorry about that. Let me just. All right, so when we send it to a group, one of the things that's going to be tricky is like the effect send levels. So just get this open real quick here. So, you know, and what a VCA, what a group does is it sums all of the different sources together. So I will just find a project real quick. All right, so let's say as we're here, all right, so as we want to, let's say we have, all right, let's get the right version of this project so YouTube doesn't get weird on me. Don't want to have ads on our live stream videos. All right, so say. All right, so we have a number of our tracks that are being automated. So when we want to use a VCA, it'd be primarily when we want to do, like we have existing automation. And so if I send all these to a group, what's going to happen is, you know, the group is going to sum all of the channels. So we'll add a group channel here. And when I do this, it's going to, but as we mentioned before, if we have like snares that are going into, let's say, a reverb here, and let me just make the reverb a little more prominent. All right, so now when I have sent all this to a group and we solo the snare, depending on, you know, on if you have it set for pre-fader or post-fader, this could affect the gain structure as we sum this. So what we want to do often is, you know, so we could use groups when we want to sum and process. Like I want to take all the drums and compress them, all the background vocals and compress them. But often what we want to do is to not affect the automation. And if we have like complex automation going on, I'm going to now add these to a VCA track. So we're going to add a VCA to the selected tracks. And as we look here, just start with the VCA here. I'm just set my routing here since these are now going to no bus. All right, so now that we have all of these going to a VCA, I could adjust the VCA, but it doesn't affect the gain structure of like my track with my snare that's going out to the send. So if we wanted to now do automation, so let's say I have automation that's going up at certain times and down at certain times, like contrary automation. So as this track is going up, this one may be going down. So if I wanted to take all of my drums with their existing automation contours, and if I automate my VCA, I could bring my VCA down, and tracks that are automating upward will still automate upward. And as I go to automate the VCA up, tracks that are going down will still be going down, but will be attenuated. So I move it up, I can still see tracks employing their particular automation. So when we go to a particular track, let's say we go to our snare track and we look at its automation line, and we'll kind of blow this up, we'll see two different automation curves. So we'll see kind of the actual automation and what the result of the VCA is going to be. Now we could go to our VCA and at this point choose to combine the automation of the VCA and the linked channels. So at this point we could keep the existing automation contours and trim or boost those particular all those different tracks together with a VCA and not worry about affecting the gain structure when dealing with auxiliary sends. So again, the VCA doesn't sum, and if you want to take all of your tracks and combine them and process them as a single entity, a group is a great solution. If you have existing automation on those particular tracks, a VCA is a great workflow for that because you're able to maintain the relationship between the different tracks while, maintaining those automation relationships and still being able to cut or boost using the VCA and not affect the gain structure going to sends. All right. So let's move on. All right, so we see a question of from Mark Rabin. What's it mean when buttons in Edit Pattern tab go to red in Groove Agent 5, but the drums are still working, like red auto fill on 2, 4, 8, 12, 16? All right, so let's go ahead and open up an instance of Groove Agent. I'll start with the SE, see if we can get it to recreate. Okay, so let me come over and we'll load the kit with patterns. All right, let me just load one. That's sounds like it might be like more of a acoustic agent kit. Okay, so let's say. Okay, what's it mean when in the edit pattern tabs go red? Okay, so let's see. See if I get it. All right, so what's it mean when the buttons in edit pattern tab go red in Groove Agent 5, but the drums are still working, like red auto and fill on 2, 4. All right, so let me see if I can find out where those particular where it's turning red for you. So let's see if it's all right, so let's see if it's maybe when we switch patterns, like maybe if it's waiting for particular patterns. Let's see. If I get it to so say if we turn on autofill. Say every 4 bars, we'll see if it's going to do a fill. So Mark, maybe if you could tell me like where, let me just see, I'm just going to read again. It says like auto and fill on, so it might be, So if you could let me know, Mark, where you see it going red exactly. So maybe with the autofill, it's maybe when it's waiting. So we could have it kind of randomly do fills. But let me know, Mark, where you notice that it's turning red. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, and we have Instrabase checking in from Poland. Thanks for joining us. And Manjeet Dogra checking in as well. All right, we have Laura Burton checking in from North Yorkshire. Thanks for joining us and being part of the live stream today. All right, so just see, Greg, I have some music, would like to share it with Cubase users. So you might be able to, I think only moderators can post something in the link, but you might be able to creatively word it if you wanted to share a link to your music so people could listen to it. Okay, so we have a question. When I select 3 to 4 tracks and want to make them into a folder, after I select to make them a folder, it only makes the folder, and I have to put all the tracks manually into the folder. Doing something wrong. So generally it kind of works as expected. So let's say if I have all of these tracks, and I wanted to put all the vocal tracks in a folder. So make sure that you select the particular tracks as opposed to maybe if you're selecting events here, so maybe if you're selecting the events, you do that, but make sure that you have the tracks selected and then right click. And instead of just adding a folder track, make sure that you select the move selected tracks to new folder. And then they'll all be placed directly into this folder for you. So make sure the tracks are selected, and then when you right click, that you use move selected tracks to new folder function. So try that, see if that helps. All right, we have Jess Sabelski joining from Chico, California. Thanks for joining us. And I just see with the folder, it says same with selected tracks to make group track though. So again, make sure that you have the track selected and not events. So if I just wanted to come here, I could add the group track directly there, just like that. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see if I can See, I have lots of questions in my future here. All right, so I may have lost some questions. Sorry about that. We seem to have a lot of activity today. So if, all right. Okay, so I think I'm okay. I don't think I lost questions. Okay, so we see that there's been snow in northern Spain this week. All right, so we see question, do you have any plans for Dolby Atmos specific Hangout? I'm sure lots of people have lots of questions. I have one. How similar is the, I guess, the Dolby Atmos implementation in Cubase and Nuendo, or Nuendo videos on YouTube relevant? So there's some new functions. So if you watch the Nuendo 12 functionality, like the Nuendo 12 preview event that Sebastian did, those are more relevant. So I think some of the differences are, with the Cubase version, we don't have the ability to import the ADM file. And we could use the internal renderer and I think only a single bed, whereas the Nuendo version, we could have multiple beds. We could use like the external Dolby renderer if you own that. So if you have I think it's a Dolby, production suite or something like that. So if you wanted to use that, so multiple beds and the ability to import ADM files. So if someone passed on an ADM file, you could then, tweak the mix and be able to do different stuff like that. So those are some of the main differences, but we could look at doing kind of a Dolby Atmos specific Hangout in the future. All right, so we have a question. Hi, is there a way to control the audio fader with the inspector with CC? I do volume writing a lot and currently doing it with my mouse. Would be nice to use my monogram controller and have one of the faders on that to work with the audio fader of the selected track. I'm on Nuendo 11, by the way. All right, so I'm going to get my Choy Sauce controller here. Let me just get this on my desk. All right, so what you could do is in Nuendo 11, you could come over here. So let's say we go to our studio setup and let's go to generic remote. So let's say, okay, I wanted to use your particular controller. So you want to set the MIDI input and output port. So we'll say like this fader, and I may already have this assigned to a particular CC, so bear with me. I'll just remap this. All right, so I have this fader mapped here to channel 13. And then I think we want to just come over here to VST mixer. And then we could just say selected volume. Okay, so set up your MIDI input and output. So we'll say this MIDI controller, channel 13, will go for the volume of the selected track. So as soon as I come here, I move the fader, I select a different track, it's automatically controlling the fader just that easily. That's all you have to do. So come over to your studio setup. map whatever the controller is here. You could just move your monogram controller, and just you want to say, I want this controller to go to the VST mixer to select it, and volume and whatever channel you have, it will automatically carry over. Now, in Nuendo 12, which will be out next week, there's going to be a whole new MIDI remote function. So you'll be able to come over here and go to the mapping assistant. And now you could just say, okay, go on to the selected track. And I just want this particular slider of my choice os controller. We can say, go to the selected track and just select volume there. So that's two different ways that you could just control the particular volume of the selected track using MIDI CC messages. Okay, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. So I see, Greg, which bass player do you prefer in the world? For me, it's Jaco Pastorius. I like sometimes, like for raw technical ability, I think Jeff Berlin was always a favorite of mine. I think some undersung heroes in kind of the pop world. I think early Peter Cetera stuff on early Chicago is great. I would love to be able to just play like John McVie. I thought he'd play just masterful bass lines. Paul McCartney did a lot of stuff. I liked his stuff in Wings a lot as well. So some of his bass playing in Wings is more underrated than his Beatles stuff, which he also did great lines on. But I always try to, and there's a lot of great fretless stuff. I'm trying to remember the bass player who played on the Kate Bush stuff, who was her producer for a while, and I think they dated. I thought his fretless playing was wonderful as well. So, but there's all sorts of wonderful players. Okay, so we have a question. I have set up multiple colors in the color selected, 8x10, so 80 colors. When I create multiple tracks, it picks the color sequentially, but how to at any time choose a track and have the colors selector starts from. So the starts color I want to add from the track I want, and then changes sequentially based on my color selector design layout. Okay, so I'll just do a new project. Okay, so let's say we have our colors set up here, and I'll just go ahead and add some additional color setup. So if I don't go to that window, we'll go to our project color setup this time. So let's say I want to go to my options, and I'll add, let's say, more like 6. We'll do 32 colors here. So we'll have 32 colors, and I'll apply that. So let's say I add an audio track, and at this point I wanted to start with kind of this shade of green. Okay, so there are preferences at this point. So when we go to preferences to user interface, you'll see track and mix console channel colors. So I think we could just set this to use the previous track color plus 1. So now if I add, let's say, 8 tracks, I think it should increment from this color. So now when we look at our colors, we could see that these colors will just be kind of incrementally added. So try going to the preference here and just do the use previous track color +1. Or you could just have it, use previous track color. So there's a number of different options there. So give that a try. All right, I just see just a question, what am I going to do with the project? So seeing if I can find if there was a reference to another question, but I don't see. So maybe it's directed at someone else. All right, reading through more comments. Thanks. Okay, reading through more comments here. Okay, so you see a question. I recently got Dorico to run alongside a Cubase Pro 12. Can I get it to open as a score editor while Cubase is running? So it's not going to open as an editor while Cubase is running, but you could have Dorico open as a separate program. I know there's lots of discussion and lots of customers are wanting integration, and I think that Steinberg is starting to work on that, so that we could have strong integration between the two programs. But currently, you could have both programs open and you could drag an event from Cubase into Dorico, but it's not going to replace the score editor, so they'll kind of function independently. Okay, so I just see a question. Is there a way to render in place where the rendered audio goes to, example, a new track version rather than creating a new track every time? So when we do the render in place, I've asked for similar functionality. So you'd have to kind of manually put it into a track version. But it doesn't do that automatically. Hopefully it's a suggestion that Steinberg will implement. So, it'd be great to have, rendered to new track version for a lot of particular edits. Okay, so we just see from Jeff Sabelski, hi Greg, upgraded to Absolute 5 from 4 thanks to the sale. So it was a 35% off promotion for Absolute 5, and I believe Spectral Layers and VST Connect Pro. Says would save time if there was a way for the download assistant could verify the VSTs that need updating or not. Libraries don't change. So sometimes the libraries do change, with different, you'll notice that for Cubase 12, some of the libraries needed to be updated. So some of the libraries do change, but there's, some of the bigger instruments that most people would download from 4 to 5 would be like the electric bass and backbone. But there's a couple of other libraries as well. All right, so I just see a comment. Please, Steinberg, we need more control room. 4 cues isn't enough. So, people would often use the aux sends for that. But yeah, I've mentioned it for more additional cue mixes as well. So I'll reiterate the point. Thanks for letting us know. All right, so we have Owino Ramji checking in from Nairobi, Kenya. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I just see a beautiful piece, beautiful sound of heavy metal guitars. Where can we listen to it in full, please? So I could check with Fred Corey. Maybe he might even be on the live stream today, but I could check with Fred Corey to see if that song was ever released. I think it was him and maybe the old singer and guitarist from Talus, who is, I think it was Talus, which was Billy Sheehan's band from the early 80s. So I'm not sure if it was released. Sometimes if it's not released, it's good because then I could use it for YouTube demos. So, but if you want to send me an email, I could check with Fred. I owe him a phone call anyway. It'd be a great way to, good excuse to reach out to him. You see Gareth just also mentioning that the Steinberg VST amps went out easily over other far more expensive competitors. So yeah, it works out really well. And actually, Steinberg was the first company that ever did a software guitar amp. They called it Red Velvet, like probably 1995 or so for TDM. All right. So we just see from Kenny Jobson. Hi, Greg. What's your best configuration generally for using 2 compressors in series? So what a lot of people will end up doing is, treating the compressors for different types of functions. So sometimes we'll see people that will, let me just, that will come over here and maybe like for certain attacks be able to like, okay, I want a, like if we have just a drum part, we may want to have like, certain parts that would be applied, a lot of people would set up like, a multi-stage compressor, not necessarily a parallel. So if you want to do it kind of in series, a lot of people like to mimic kind of a Beatles drum sound will do like 2 stages of compression. So one for, like just the immediate attacks to kind of pump it up, and then another stage just to do that. Some people will also need to do like, and they want to kind of isolate it for particular frequencies. So let's say, okay, I want to compress like the snare versus the kick drum independently. And that's often when you could use like a multi-band compressor where you could pick the different frequency ranges that you want to apply to, so you can have independent compression based on the frequency range. So those are kind of the 2 different methods that are often employed for series. So you see from Mark Rabin, just saying, Gareth, you're right. I have lots of VST amp plugins. I keep going back to the Blackface and VST amp. All right, so Steve Allen just saying, no, please, no subscription. So that's often what we hear. So you just see, Greg, what DI is used in the heavy track? So I don't think there's anything in particular. I think, it's kind of a clever trick that I've done for years, and I'm sure Fred does it as well, or maybe you don't, you're questioning, or the guitarist, excuse me, just a second. When maybe you're questioning the guitarist amp, is always just to run a DI right before the signal, and you tell the guitarist often, oh, it's for an impedance, and then just kind of record a direct signal so that it could be applied. So I'm not sure which particular DI, but I have a feeling it wasn't anything special, but just kind of a generic DI box. But I could check and see. But I don't think it was anything special that you couldn't get from any standard DI box. Okay, so we have a question from Alan Rosenberg. Thanks for joining us. Is there any way the folder that is created for your project can be cleaned up after a project is finished? It does take up a lot of space on the hard drive. So if you have files, audio files that are going to be maybe takes that aren't used, one of the things that you could do is if you just go to, let's say if we just go to a project that has some audio files in it. We'll activate this. And now as we come here, if you go to the media, you could just say remove unused media from the pool. So in that way, if you have like takes that aren't being used in the project, that will move it to the trash. And then within the pool folder or media, at that point, you could choose to empty the trash, and that would get rid of files that aren't being used in a project that were maybe recorded as alternate takes or something like that. All right, so I just see a question from Jay from Connecticut. I want to touch base about where you got my email. So I got your email, and I'm still waiting for, I have to kind of check. I didn't have my beta license had expired, so I wasn't able to check, but I hopefully should have the ability to check and give you an answer to your question on Monday. All right, so Nick is saying, I think Yamaha needs to upgrade your work Mac. So I think I'll have a new Mac. We usually, for our corporate computers, we lease them for 2.5 years, which is probably better if you do like, spreadsheets as opposed to audio. So, but I'm in line, I think by September 1st to have my new work computer. So hopefully should be kind of fast, but I think this one's been working out pretty well. But there's a lot of stuff when transmitting 60 frames per second as well. So, all right. So we see question: is Steinberg able to internally flip the mouse scroll behavior of Shift to Control as a preference option? I changed it in the system, but caused a lot of issues with other programs. It says, I know it's an old repeating question. So currently, it kind of goes with the operating system. So if you wanted to switch the direction of the mouse, there isn't a way internally in Cubase to kind of flip the direction. It's kind of just based upon the operating system, but I'll make sure to pass it on again as a feature request. All right, we see that Gareth is recommending the BSS Audio AR133 as a vastly underrated DI box. That sounds fantastic. He uses it for bass and guitar. All right. All right, so I just see question. I have a 2019 Mac Pro desktop and have the latest version of Cubase. Is it safe to switch from Big Sur to Monterey? Thank you very much. And what are your thoughts on Monterey? So, as long as, Cubase is fine on it, but make sure like all of your components are fine, so all your plugins, all of your hardware, all of that is working fine under Monterey. So Cubase is fine. All the internal Cubase plugins are fine, but, just make sure that everything is, all of your other third-party components are working as expected. All right, and we have Fabio checking in from Italy and Razel from Denmark. See Michael Teams just saying congrats on 30 years, Greg. So thank you very much. It's been an incredible experience. I'm very fortunate. Okay, so I just see question. We need export the track from after mix and master. So if you wanted to export the track, I'm not sure if you wanted to export with mixing and mastering or, so if we wanted to do your export audio mix down, you could include, so let's say if I just come here, okay, I want the stereo and, that would include everything in the channel process. If we wanted to do multiples, we could, choose different effects processing. If you wanted to, after the exported file, open it in Wavelab Pro, for mastering, you could do it there. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we just see a question. Hello, how can I link a MIDI track to its audio track coming from Contact? So basically any track that is, so let's come over, let me just open up different project here. So, if you're starting from a MIDI track that's going out to Contact, then you have a MIDI fader, and that MIDI fader is automatically going to be sent to the virtual instrument, and the instrument will have its own audio capabilities. And you could edit those all together in one within the inspector. So I'll just show you when we open up this particular project here. If you do instrument tracks, it doesn't open up a MIDI fader per se, but it will, kind of consolidate the MIDI volume and the audio volume of the two different sources. So maybe if you start with an instrument track, but once you get this project open, not sure why it's taking so long. All right. We'll show you how you could go directly to the audio track from a MIDI track if that's what you have set up. Okay, so if we have a MIDI track that's going out to a particular instrument, so we could see that when we select this that we have kind of the MIDI volume selected, but if you just click right here, at that point you could just go directly to the audio channel, and then you could do all of the audio processing right there. So anytime that you have the event selected, so if it's a MIDI track being routed to a virtual instrument like Contact, just click here to edit the instrument channel settings, and then that will take you directly to the audio events for that particular instrument. So you see Michael Pierce just saying, congrats, Greg, this amazing 30 years, such a cool history. So I've been incredibly fortunate that I made up my dream job and I get to do it still after all these years. So we see, hi, Greg, is there any icon that lets you visually know when the whole MIDI orchestra instruments is fully loaded into a project and ready to play? So generally, as you just saw, like when I was doing that, you saw kind of the timeline, like as it's loading the project. So as soon as we see like all the instruments are loaded, when it was kind of going across horizontally, that means as soon as we see that that's ready to play, that we could just hit play and be all set. So we see Kenny Jobson just talk about Jeff Berlin, and Jazz Dude seems to be a Alan Holdsworth fan, and Alan was just so incredibly sweet and humble, and it was and yeah, he was just such a sweet guy. I miss Alan a lot. So I had, you know, 3 or 4 times just hang out at his house for like a day. So really fond memories, and, you know, incredibly humble about his own abilities. We see a nice comment from Mark Rabin, says, I was blessed to get taught how to manipulate my DAW from Greg Undo, the most incredible educator / Yoda. So, but you probably had a lot of great abilities already, Mark. So we just got to help you get there a little faster. So. Okay, so you see maybe a further clarification to the channel numbers. So it says, hi, Greg, no note. Regarding the channel number, if you have a rack instrument which brings MIDI and channels from the step after you create MIDI tracks on the out input to the left, you all highlighted MIDI tracks. You could do that for channel numbers. I want to set the channel numbers increasing sequentially, not to one single number, as I did that for the MIDI. All right, so let's say if I add, I'll just come here. Let's add an instrument, a multi-timbral instrument such as Hallian Sonic SE. All right, so let's say if I come here, so we'll just call this our Hallian Sonic SE. And I'm going to add, let's say, a number of MIDI tracks to it. So this is in channel 1. So now as we come here, so we go here, this will be going to the same Hallian Sonic SE, MIDI 2, MIDI 3, MIDI 4, 5, 6. So it says if you have rack instrument which brings MIDI and channels, then the step after you create MIDI tracks, the out and input to the left, you all highlighted MIDI tracks. So you could do that for channel numbers, but I want to set the channel numbers increasing sequentially, not to one single number, as I did that for MIDI. So I'm not sure if you want it. So we see that as we add the MIDI tracks, they're going to be labeled sequentially, and the MIDI channels are also incremented sequentially. So, but sorry if I'm misunderstanding John. Right, we see Jazz Dude is John McLaughlin, is one of his favorite guitar players. I was trying to see him in concert like 30 years ago, and then it was Jeff Berlin was touring with him, and he was opening up for Miles Davis, and Miles Davis canceled because he got sick. So, see, Michael Team says he wants to go to Hong Kong, so it's a really long flight. So, especially when you have to fly from Los Angeles back to the East Coast and be back for 3 hours. And I think I went from DC to New York to Vancouver to Hong Kong, so I was probably in a plane for 30 hours out of 34 hours or something. So Okay, so we see from Soren says, I don't know what I do correct. How can it be possible? Does Cubase know what's on my mind? I create a chord track, C to A minor, to F to G, and then create a rhythm play of the chord C in Midi, dum da dum 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 dum, and then copy that. And other chords get that rhythm when I paste. So yeah, so if we have, and we'll show this for the benefit of other people. So I'll just start this. We'll open up this project. Okay, so let's say we have a Rhodes part. All right, so I will get solo this, and let's say I just want to. And if I hit record, that would be helpful. All right, so let's say I just want to take this one part. So I'm just going to play the same chord. All right, so let's say now if I have this particular track follow the chords, so we could just say follow the chord track, and we'll say the chords. And then at this point, if I just kind of do a chord progression, so let's say I want to do C, and we'll just. All right, and let's go ahead and let's say I'll just grab my range tool here. Okay, I'll just duplicate the chords. So now as we look at the chords now, they'll automatically. So if it's told to follow the chords, it'll be kind of, you can think of it like almost a musical parasite, if you will. So it's just going to follow whatever chord. So if I say, okay, I want this to be a B flat diminished chord, you can see that as we change the chord, we could look at the MIDI data here, and that will automatically synchronize with that. So now you have an incredibly bad chord progression I just did. So maybe you just got lucky and you had the tracks follow the chords track by default. All right. So we see from Steve Allen, he's just mentioning, hi, Greg, there's a memory from 30 years ago. Found a box of 5.5-inch floppies today. My archive room at the studio used them for a total recall drive on the SSL. Crumbs, I'm old. So I remember we had like the 10-inch floppies where I worked in New York. So, and I just thought of just kind of reading through some of the other comments and some of the people memories that were highlights. And another great one is, got to spend 2 days with Donald Fagen, just me and him in his apartment in New York. So that was such a joy, such a huge fan of his work. All right, wonderful to see Marcos Gomez on the live stream. And we see Cubase Junkie as well as joined us. Gareth is saying the Atari is the future. Samson Strike is awaiting Nuendo 12, so it should be just next week. Okay, so it says, hey, I'm a beginner. Can someone help me with initials of vocal treatment and basic mixing? All right, so let's take a look at like a vocal project here. So I think I got one that we could just open up. Okay, so let's say we just wanted to take a look at some of the vocals. So some things that are very common with vocal mixing. So let's say I just want to select my vocal track here. Is just doing kind of a... So let's say we just want to solo our vocal. So doing like a pre. So a lot of times there's a lot of information that could kind of muddy up a vocal in the low end. So if you go to kind of like the pre section and just be able to kind of roll that off. And just kind of listen to that in context. And if we turn that off, there could be a lot of kind of muddying information in the vocal there. I will often use just a little bit of compression. You could also use a bit of de-essing if necessary, and you can see that under Tools. And often I just may add a little bit of high end just to add some clarity. Just to kind of add a little bit there. And I see a lot of people that will, add so many plugins on a vocal that, and it's almost like, oh, I have this reverb for this word, this reverb for this word. And it's just kind of sounds really bad, but just, I usually on vocals try to use just a basic reverb and maybe a delay and kind of keep it very simple because you don't want it to be losing focus. I was talking with one of my friends, Gary Pachoza, and he's, an amazing engineer, and you could Google him. Pachoza, and we're just doing an interview video with him. And one of the things that he does for vocals that's really interesting, and just to have a different flavor, is he always kind of throws up like a junk mic, just a mic that's just sitting in his studio that the vocalist doesn't know that's being used. And he will often use that, to layer in, and it's just like a random, some cheap mic. And he just has it up where the singer never realizes that it's on. And then he will often take, blend that in to get a different flavor, or he takes he'll use that mic for like the reverb or delay sends, just to get kind of something a little more edgy. So, but basic things, try rolling off low end. You want to, try to edit out. Like if you have, like breaths, you could say, okay, like here's a big breath. I just want to come here and be able to kind of bring that down and, kind of keep, don't go crazy with signal processing, because you just want to have some kind of emotion with the vocal so that it works. So, those are some tips for vocals. All right, so we see Graham Witcher is just apologizing for missing Tuesday's live stream. No problem, we missed you, but we're glad you can make it today. All right, so we have a question. Does anyone know if Cubase 12 will work with Windows 10 Pro, or would I need to upgrade Windows? You could run on Windows 10 Pro. That's what I do, so no problems. reading through comments. So thanks for all the great comments and questions. And if you do learn anything, make sure that you actually hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. And that enables us to continue to do the live streams. We see Graham Witchers just mentioning that people shouldn't forget to take advantage of the Steinberg spring sale. There's some great offers there, so yeah, check that out. All right, so we see a question from Gareth. I remember my question in Groove Agent 5. Could you show me how to route an aux out for side chaining the kick without activating all the outputs? Okay, so let's see if we could get this going. So let's jump. We'll get to this project here. Okay, so just get the okay, so let's say I wanted to set this up to sidechain. So I think if we come to our aux, I'm going to send this to so let's say I want to take the kick, and I'm going to send it to my kick out to aux send 2. So as we send my aux send 2, then when we go in the mixer and we click on aux, we could send this to a different output. So it's still going out of the main output. So when we go to our mix console, this aux FX2 is basically just our kick. And now if I wanted to set up a side chain from a different source, so let's say I want to take this track and set it up as a side chain. I'll take a different track and we wanted to side chain from the kick. We could come over to our dynamics. So let's say we wanted to add our channel compressor. And then what we would do is we would see I think we could see our side chain output here. So our aux FX2 is now the side chain input. So we could take the kick and it's still, so if we muted this, it's still going, but we could take this particular kick here, send it to the aux send within the particular instrument. So we'll open the instrument. So we're going to just take that. So we take our aux send here. This goes out to aux send 2, and then we could route that to different outputs and then use that as a sidechain source. So let me know if that helps, Gareth. All right, so let's keep going. You see Uno Memento just reminiscing about the 2 megabytes he had on his Atari back in the day. I was lucky I had the Mega 4 ST with 4 megs of RAM, Dare to Dream. All right, so we have Stephen Banta checking in, just joining in. So thanks for being a part of the live stream today. You see Mark Rabin has to take off and run some errands. So thanks for joining us today. My live stream just jumped on me, so let me see. Trying to find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm in the ballpark where I was. All right. And Stephen Bantas from Sacramento. Okay, so I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, we have John Mills checking in from West Yorkshire. So I think we have 2 or 3 people on from Yorkshire. I'm not sure if West Yorkshire is different than I think where Laura was from, but thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Laura Burton question, clicking off a MIDI track to any other track sends a track fader value of 0 to my MIDI device, Akai S5000. Manually moving the fader on the MIDI track resets it, but it can Cubase filter the reset. So it's going to take a look. It might be when we come over to our preferences. So one is, you could on the MIDI track itself, when you were here, try to set your MIDI volume like here, directly here. So if this is set to 0 and let's say you stop it and you hit play again, if your MIDI volume isn't set on the track and this is set maybe to 0 as opposed to off, that might reset the message directly there, Laura. But let's see if there may be a reset preference. Let's go to preferences to MIDI. Okay, and you may also want to just, when you click reset on stop, so check on MIDI that you don't have, you could check this preference here, and then you could also just do chase events, and maybe, because you'd have volume as a MIDI CC7, so maybe try to toggle these 2 preferences, so reset on stop, and also MIDI, never reset chased controllers, and also chase events. So probably one of those 3 would allow you to keep your S5000. But if you just have it set directly here, or if you have it automated with the volume, then it should automatically go back directly to that particular value. So give that a shot. See, Graham Witcher says, I'm kind of not missing my dongle now, so it's okay. Okay, so we have a question. Says, I've created 10 groups for Vox and sent each of them to a verb and sent all the groups to a main Vox group and then pull down a fader for the main group, the verb doesn't get affected. So let's go ahead and create this. I'll just do a new project here. So I'm not sure if you're starting with 10 groups or maybe 10 vocal tracks, but it should be the same. So let me just come here and I'll drop in some quick vocal samples.
And I don't know if I have it. And I don't spend another 1,000 nights.
Okay, so let's say we have our vocals here. So let's say so I created 10 groups for Vox and sent each of them to a verb. Okay, so let's say if I create just a group, so I'm going to add the group channels to the selected channels. Okay, and all the groups to a main vocal group. So let's just say we'll just add one at a time. So I'm going to add an effects channel to the selected channel, or let's, all right, let me just check where the, excuse me. Okay, so let's say these are all going to a effects channel. So let's say we're going to send this to a reverb. Okay, and we'll just, okay, and so we have it going through the group, and the group has its reverb in it. And then all those going to a main Vox group. So let's say, so we'll call this our master Vox. Okay, and then when I pull down the fader for the main Vox group, verb doesn't get affected. All right, so let's say if I come here and I'm going to bring down my master Vox group. So with this, make sure that, you know, one thing, if you're still hearing the verb and it's not affected when you bring down the Vox track, is when you make sure that this vocal or the reverb, that the effects track is being routed to that group. So if this was being sent to the stereo output, now when I bring it down, so say we do this, we'll hear probably the reverb. So if you want it, if you're still hearing the reverb and you don't want that to be affected, just switch the routing of that reverb to the group. And then as you bring that down, then that reverb will be included within kind of your master Vox. So let me know if I understood that correctly. Okay, reading through different comments. All right, so I just see a question. This is kind of maybe asked earlier, and I probably misunderstood it. It says we need export all tracks for after mix and master. So if you have a number of different tracks that you wanted to, so say if we jump to this project and I wanted to export them individually with all of the processing, I would just go to my file to export audio mix down. And at this stage, I would select multi. I could select all of my audio tracks. And at this point, we could just say include the master groups and sends, and then it would include all of the EQs, inserts, channel strip, my effects ends, and master effects on each of the tracks as they're rendered. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding, but that's how you could do for after mix and master. Okay, reading through. All right, so I just see from Rack Max. Hi, Greg. Once again, thanks for the live streams. Is there a way to transform an audio bass guitar to MIDI? I tried with Very Audio, but the result wasn't satisfying. How can I get better results? So, you know, let's say if I wanted to just take this. So I will come here and I will take this bass line and I'll get a Very Audio. And I'll convert this. You know, cleaning up segments will definitely help. So you can say, okay, like this, like as you do. So now I'll go to my functions and let's extract MIDI. And also, if you're doing a lot with, you wanted to also just do, you could do notes and, you know, pitch bend data. That can make a big difference. So you could do, so say, okay, just want to do just notes. So let's come over here and we'll add an instrument track. Let's do a High-End Sonic SE. And let's go to just the electric bass. And I'll just move this. And let me just move all of my MIDI notes up an octave here. All right, and let me just edit the instrument here real quick. So I think I transposed it wrong, but let's say if I just want to come here. So it seems to work pretty well, like on this example. And then you could switch. So if you want to be more, so you could just kind of switch different, but it seems to work pretty well. Then I had some of the key switches, switch different articulations, but you give that a try. But work with some of the different segments in and cleaning up the segments in Vari Audio, and then I think you can get some really good results. All right, reading through more comments. All right, so I may have missed Michael Pierce's Tuscan bean soup recipe, but it always sounds good. So you see from Gareth, wasn't Kate Bush's main bass player her ex? Yeah, it was that guy. I'm trying to remember his name. It's just escaping me now. Del Palmer, maybe. But I thought he played a lot of great bass parts. And great engineer, producer as well for her work. And Pino Palladino, so yeah, I love his fretless playing. And also, as Graham mentioned, he was in John Entwistle replacement. So I'm a huge John Entwistle fan. That was also a thrill of my career, meeting John Entwistle at my first NAMM show and talking with him for about 20 minutes with him and Skunk Baxter. All right, so we have a question. Will Cubase 12 Pro work on Windows 10 Pro? Yes. So I think there's a special, like a 21.9H version that it's kind of optimized for, but you don't need to upgrade to Windows 11 for that. All right, so I see, does Melodyne work with Cubase Artist 12? So I think it'll work as a VST plugin, and I don't know off the top of my head if Artist has ARA2, but you should be able to run it as a plugin if it's not. All right, so we see question, hello Greg, is there any way to have more than 8 quick controls? So you can have 8 quick controls, but if you need it more, what you could actually do is, especially with 12, with the MIDI remote. So let's come over here and let me just remap some of my quick controls here, my Choy Sauce controller. Okay, so I'm going to just move this particular fader. Let me get out of my generic remote. And I'm just going to set my CC message back on my controller. Sorry about this. Let me just. All right. So now when I want to come over here, I'm just going to move this and I'm going to assign this to quick controls. So there was some functions that have been added with 12 with the new Midi remote. So you're going to have 8 quick controls. But like if we have this on, so let's say we have this on Halligan Sonic SE, you know, there is something that you could do for, I want it to be only on tracks. So let's say if I'm on this audio track and I go to my quick controls and I want this to be like my volume, pan, my low cut filter, on and off, the low cut frequency. So let's say sends 1 and 2. So, you know, we could come over here and as we select our different parameters. So now when I'm on a track, I could do that. But if I have a plugin on this particular track, you know, so instead of having to remap to different things, let's say I go to distortion, we go to the VST amp rack. And as we come over here, we can see the QC function, and now I could remap for this particular control. So if we have our quick controls set up, you know, I could just say, okay, I want this to be on my VST bass amp when the plugin is active. But if we come here, we could say when I go to the track, so now I click on the track itself. Now these track quick controls are controlling the track. I click here, the plugin is the active window, it's controlling the plugin. So we have 8 controls, but we could quickly turn back and forth. Or if I want only track focus quick controls, I could do that. So I could, if I had another 8 faders or 8 knobs, I could have another MIDI remote control set up to just do my track focus quick controls, and then one that could just do plugins. And if you wanted to come over here and lock, so that every time that we're on, you know, regardless of what is open, we could also go to your quick controls and lock the quick controls focus. So it's only going to be on this particular track regardless of what is selected. So if I come here and open up quick controls, the quick controls aren't going to have any impact on this unless I'm on the bass track. So you could use multiple controls, multiple banks of quick controls for different functions simultaneously if you wanted to get more. But I think it's pretty smart how you could use you know, a bank of 8 quick controls and switch it between different areas of focus. And that was one of the nice additions in Cubase 12. All right, so I see Jazz, you confirmed that Cubase Artist does have ARA2 support, so you could use your Melodyne with that as well. See Graham Witcher, some other recommendations for great bass players, so I'll have to check those out. Thanks. All right, so I just see a comment. Cool, because Pro comes with its own auto-tune system, but Artist is more affordable. So actually, if you have Cubase Artist, the Very Audio is part of the Cubase Artist since version 11. So, all right, so we see Michael Pierce has to step out for a little bit. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see, and I think we covered this before, how can I link MIDI track to its audio track coming from Contact, controlling everything and names linked. So, maybe instead of doing a MIDI track, just add an instrument track and route that to Contact. And I think that will consolidate it for you. See, Gareth is the only one that can make a joke with the word hypotenuse in it. So it takes a certain sense of humor, Gareth. So we appreciate it. Okay, so I just see how can I find where the ARP presets are stored for Pad Shop and Retrolog every time I open Pad Shop 2 and try to run the built-in ARP. Cubase crashes. If I create my own, then it seems to be fine. So let's see if we could figure it out. Okay. Okay, so let me just come over here and I'll just... So it looks like it's going to be saved as a flex phraser. So if we look at the path here, we could see under Pad Shop, sub presets, MIDI, effect, flex phraser. And then that looks like that would be the path for it. So if we just come over here, so look there. So I think this is going to be under Documents, Steinberg, Pad Shop, sub presets, MIDI, effect, and then flex phraser. So it looks like that's where you could just simply have that. All right, so I see a question from Samson Strike. Thank you very much for your friendly, informative streams. What was your first working Cubase MIDI system? Nice greeting. So in college, my parents helped me buy an Atari Megafor ST with a 30 megabyte hard drive. So it was huge. How could we use 30 megabytes? So that was my first system. Then I think I got an Atari Falcon and then a series of PCs over the years. I think my first PC was a 286 DX. No, it was a Pentium MMX 200, I think. And now I kind of run I had an AMD Athlon for a number of years, or an AMD Opteron system when I was 64-bit. That AMD was kind enough to give me. I had a number of AMD laptops as well. I have a Music XPC laptop that I use for PC stuff. I have an i9 currently for my studio and an i9 MacBook Pro for work. All right, so we see from Marcus Gomez says, instead of buying a new PC for Windows 11, I'm also considering one 2011 Mac Mini because I am from Brazil and all very expensive here. Even an obsolete is better option at Cubase. So you just have to be careful sometimes. If you're investing into a new system, Mac Minis are really popular, and they're small, quiet. But you just have to be careful, thinking that it is an 11-year-old computer. If there's going to be a relevant operating system update that computer won't update to. So that's been a frustrating thing for a lot of users that have to use older versions of Cubase because their computer is kind of restricted, and some think artificially, from running more contemporary operating systems. So sometimes, like you may get a year or two out of that, and perhaps the next operating system will cut off support for that particular computer, and that could really affect the longevity of it. If you're prepared to accept that, that's fine, but just be aware of it. That I've seen a lot of frustration is like, of people that can't update their iMacs to more contemporary operating systems and are running old software because they spend a lot on a computer that they can't really update as freely as they would like. All right, so we see Emmanuel Morin just saying he uses the Radial Engineer J48 DirectBox. So, all right, we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. He's saying better late than never. So there's no tardy slips here at the live stream, and that's why we have it, so you could watch it freely anytime afterwards. All right. See, Nick is just saying, I could tell the finance department that I've saved them a fortune in airfares, so deserve an upgrade. So yeah, it's kind of on a set corporate schedule, unfortunately, but I'm sure they don't mind saving a lot of money on my travel. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you learned something, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Okay, so you just see range tool in the timeline. Never saw that before. I like it. Yeah, so one of the great things is, I think since version 10 or 10.5, is Steinberg had combined kind of the range tool and the object selection tool. So if you're kind of at the top of an event, it functions as a range tool. And if you're at the bottom of the event, the object selection tool, and when you see it kind of coupled orange, where both of them are highlighted, when you select from the bottom of an event, it's an object selection tool. Select from the top, it's then a range selection tool, so you don't have to constantly switch back and forth between the two different modes. Okay, so you just see a question. Hi, Greg. Is Hallion 7 near release date? If I buy Absolute 5 now, how do I upgrade? Thank you for your kind help. So I haven't heard, I haven't seen, and a lot of times I'm not privy to pre-release information. They don't tell me because I talk to 10,000 customers a week. So So I think that you're fine if you got absolute 5, that you'd be able to upgrade perhaps to Hallian, but I haven't. It's not like it's coming out in next month, and we're trying to do a promotion for the absolute 5 to get rid of inventory or anything like that. So. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, is there a way to use Cubase to control, manipulate stems for live performance using a MIDI controller? So, if you have a number of, let's say if we have our tracks here, and I will go ahead and just duplicate this a couple of times. So let's say if we have like a number of songs that are kind of laid out, what a lot of people do for live performance, and I've seen like some pretty extensive live performance uses where you could just set a particular MIDI controller. So let's say if I wanted to jump over, and I'll use just a button on my Nectar controller here. So let's say I have a couple of these functions set up, and we wanted to define these to navigate to different sections. So one is you could just use markers to quickly navigate, but a lot of people will add let's say an arranger track. So let's add quickly an arranger track, and what I want to do is we could define like each song. So I'll just come and let's say, this will be our set that's laid out. Okay, so let's say, and we could label these whatever song names we want. So you could just Alt. And so we could give these, whatever names. Etc. All right, so, and then what we could do is say, okay, this will be the first song in our set. I want this to be the 4th and the 5th song. And we could just come over here. Let's define some different keys here. So let's say, okay, I want this particular key. And at this point, we could just go to key commands, and we'll say arranger. So we could just say, okay, I want to go to the next chain step with this key. Okay, so we'll apply the mapping, and let's go to, the previous chain step with the next button here. So as we're playing live, if you just wanted to, navigate to the next chain step here so, we could lay out kind of all of your songs here. You could change the set, and then through MIDI controllers, you could just say, I want to go to the next or to the previous, just kind of hitting these particular controls that you set up, and that could be foot switch. So a lot of people do live performance stuff just like that. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to record voice with automatic pitch correction? I would like to record one track with raw voice and the other with pitch correction. All right, so what you could do is, if we have this set up, let's say we want to do a new project, and realize that sometimes recording with pitch correction could add some additional latency. So I'm going to go to my studio settings here, and let's go to my audio connection. So I'll go to my inputs. So let's say I want input 1 to be connected to my UR24C input 1. So say that's where my microphone is, and I want input 2 to also be connected to my UR24C input 1. So at this point, we could say I want to add 2 audio tracks. Okay, so let's say the top one is coming. So let's say, okay, this is going to be coming from mono in 1. And let's say this is coming in from mono in 2. So these are going from the same inputs. So the same physical connector, but now when we go to our mix console, we see mono in 1, mono in 2. So if we wanted to apply an effect, I could just come over here and use under pitch shift, the pitch correct plugin. So at this point, we could just simply record through the same input. This track will be unaffected. We'll just call it dry Vox. And this track can be pitch corrected Vox. So this way we could record the same input going into 2 different tracks. One would be going through the pitch correct plugin and applied during the input stage. And this one would be recorded dry. So you could record kind of through plugin, dry, through the same physical connector. So once again, just set up your audio connections, the inputs to the same physical input. And on one of the tracks, you want to put just the insert of like the pitch correct, and then just record on both tracks simultaneously. Okay, just going through reading some. Okay. Okay, so we see from Best Screen Jesus, quick question on how to change the start point of a loop. Can't seem to find that S in 12. It probably exists, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. Okay, so say if we double click here. So I found that in 12, like here I could just see the S event by default. So I think that this is, so we see kind of our event end and event start. So we could just kind of drag that there. So I think I was looking, because I know in previous versions that you had to kind of add it. Let me see if there's just like a quick setting that automatically enables that. So, but, when I come here, it just automatically looks like, I could just move the event start position there. And I know kind of like it was, in 11 that there was like a little icon to hit to turn these on. Let me just see if we could. And I was looking for it in 12 in a previous live stream, and it just kind of seemed like it was on and visible by default, but it looks like it's just kind of there. And I just, while I'm here, it just seemed like there is another question about how to do, and I may have kind of skipped over it by accident, but how to do warping in Cubase 12, and a person has to go back to Cubase 11. So, one of the things that with Cubase 12 that you have the option of doing is when we want to do warping is, before in 11, it was always limited to being in the sample editor. So so the question was doing warp editing in 12. So if we are in our particular sample editor here, we could go to, let's say, our hit points. And then once we've adjusted our hit points, we could then turn these automatically into warp markers. Then you could go to the free warp, and now we could do warping directly here based upon the hit points. In version 12, we could do this on our main project window. We select the warp tool, and then we go to free warp. That now, and if you're kind of, not zoomed in, you may not see all of the warp markers, but now that you select your warp markers here, we could just do all the warping, and we can do this across multiply selected events on the project window as well. So we can just come right over here, and if you wanted to add a warp marker that maybe it didn't catch, you could just click and add the warp marker and be able to adjust like so. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski, will Nuendo 12 have everything Cubase 12 Pro has, since I have licenses for both Nuendo 11 and Cubase 11 Pro? I believe so. It may not have VST Transit, which is a fairly minor feature, but if I said they're exactly the same, it may not be the most accurate thing. So I think, but except for VST Transit, that they'll be identical. Okay, so we see a question. I was in Ian Kirkpatrick's stream yesterday. I have to give Ian a call. He's always fun. And he was mentioning that plugins like Output, RC20 mostly crash on Cubase only, not other DAWs. Just wanted to ask if it's true and why. So I don't work with other DAWs, but there are, every time that Cubase gets updated, sometimes it could be a little tighter with plugins that are, that kind of fall out of spec with the VST3 specification to make it more stable in general for use. So I'm not sure if it's, particularly accurate that it's going to crash other programs less, and sometimes other programs will be using different plugin formats as well, so it could be hard to actually figure out if you need to actually, if it's a apples and oranges comparison between the two. So there's a lot of variables between, how different programs will be using plugins. All right, so we have a question. Can you build tracks up by building sections in a project and by using the arranger track to play sections for a set number of times? Yeah, certainly. That's one of the great things with the arranger track is, let's say if I go to this particular project, if you wanted to just repeat different sections of your project. So let's say, I'll have this going on. So let's say as we're doing this, so let's say I'll just kind of show you. So you could just kind of take your different parts and drag them in. So I could just say, okay, I want this to be repeated a number of different times. So, and this will allow us to do, let's say if I'm here in this particular project. All at once, it kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. So I've defined my different sections. I'll just go to the beginning. And then if I wanted to do like a 1-bar chorus, funny stuff like
Somebody wants to take you just the way you are. Don't it make you
so you could just repeat different parts and build up really creative arrangements from without having to manually copy all of the different parts. Okay. All right. So we got a question from Tiago. Is there a way to set a specific file location for Project Logical Editor user presets? Since my Cubase 12 update, my presets were lost. Restoring user profile didn't work. So I think as soon as we come over here, so generally it's going to be automatically be, let me just see if it's, okay, Project Logical Editor. So when we come here, let me just open the Project Logical Editor quickly. So we'll go to the setup. That once we come over here, so we go to, you'll see, so I'll close this, and you'll see show user presets location. So I think, it's going to look in this particular folder. So if we look at it, it's going to be documents. And this might be different if you're on PC, and I apologize for that, but you'll see Cubase user presets, Project Logical Editor. But if we wanted to, so, if we kind of follow the path here, so this would be under your user account, in Documents, Settings, Steinberg, Cubase, User Presets, Project Logical Editor. That's where all of the user presets are going to be stored. And if you want to manually copy them over, and if you're on Windows, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of send you all of, if you're on Windows, I could send you the exact path. And I'd be happy to kind of send all of my presets. So if you wanted to populate it like that. So again, send me, clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski is number 99 thumber. So thanks for the thumbs up, and we appreciate it. All right. All right, my chat field jumped on me, so let me just find my spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so, all right, so I just see a question, why is your mouse movement so jittery? Too much coffee? So I did have a coffee today that I finished before the live stream, so maybe it's that. Sometimes it may be, like the refresh rate on a video, but it could be just me. Sorry. I know that could be annoying to watch. Okay, so you have a question. I'm using URRT2, so obviously small scale home recording. Does this make the control room irrelevant? Sorry. I'm assuming so. I currently have it disabled. So, with the URRT2, currently to access the DSP on particular inputs, having the control room turned on will we'll make, and if you're using a control room, we'll make that so that you don't see the inputs. So while tracking, it may not be the best, but you could use the control room for lots of other functions, such as, doing A/B mixes, the listen bus, and some other functions. Hang on one second. My son's knocking on the door. All right, my apologies for the disruption. Okay, reading through. See, Gareth is just saying Groove Agent is a beast, so virtual and a great sound library. Okay. I see Gareth is educating me on Yorkshire, saying it was split up to stop it from conquering London. So it's my ignorance. Okay, so I just see I emailed a question. Did you get it? Thank you. So I think we'll be going through some of the user questions here in just a little bit. So I just see Cubase. Oh, that's the vocal DOM used. I was thinking it was someone that he had let sing for him. Yeah, so sometimes, getting project files is, the last minute thing before doing kind of presentations. So, all right. And Cubase Junkie just wants to make sure that people are hitting the like button. All right. So we just see from Jeff Zabelski. It says, Greg, 2 slurred notes on analog oboe recording, dotted 8th tied to a 16th note, low D to E flat, syncopate it and repeat it. Best technique to clean up rhythm if the 16th note is a little late. So probably the easiest way to do this, and this might be easier starting next week on Cubase 12, but let's say if I'm, if you go to the sample editor, I would go to the audio warp and go to free warp and then just kind of click, and you could put in kind of like the warp markers here. And, at this point, and you could do this based on kind of like the hit points. And then, this is a great example where you could just do free warping to kind of clean up different rhythmic performances. So let's say I want, this was like this, and I want it to be, 3. So let's say, I want it to be 2 beats, and I wanted this to come in. We could just come right over here and just kind of warp the rhythmic timing of that part to make it fit in. So you could do that in a sample editor in Nuendo 12. Next week, you'll be able to do it directly on the project window, which can really speed up kind of your editing workflows with that. All right, so we see how to change tempo in the song and making tape stops. So let's just do changing tempo. So if we have a project here, let me just revert this. Okay, so let's say if we want to do, so I'm going to select all of the audio files here. And we want to make sure that they're all in musical mode. And we could also just select musical mode when all the events are selected, or go to your pool window. And we can make sure that all the events have a tempo and time information. So let's say if we want to change the tempo. So once the events are in musical mode, so we're at 100 beats a minute, I could just say, let's go to 144. And now all the tracks will just play back, or let's get to 88. Or anywhere in between, we could just come here. And let's say if I wanted to do like a tape stop effect. So I will just kind of come here. And as we do this, I'll just go to like loop mash FX, and you'll find this under other. All right, sorry, I'm gonna help my son here in a second. So let's say if I just want to do like a quick tape stop effect, I come here and just go. So, and you could actually play these with different MIDI notes if you wanted to. So let's say I want to speed it up. So that's how you do a quick kind of tape stop effect like that. All right, I'm gonna help my son get something on TV really quick. Sorry, he's homesick today. Bear with me just a second. All right, sorry, my apologies again for that. All right, let's get going, continue on. All right, and I just see how to change tempos during the song. So question, so maybe continuation. So if I wanted to come here, we could add what's called a tempo track. So I'm going to add track, and we go to tempo track. Then I want to activate our current tempo track here. So let's say we're going to be at 120 beats a minute. So let's say while we're playing, if I just wanted to drop in tempo changes here. And we could have these tempo changes be stepped or ramped. So if I wanted to kind of ramp and have it gradually increase, we could just have it, we watch our tempo here just increase over time. Or if I wanted to step down to a particular value right here, you could just do it like that. So your MIDI and audio, once placed in musical mode for your audio tracks, can automatically follow those tempo changes. All right. Hi, Greg. When I have a MIDI part on a track duplicated several times, when I edit one, how do I update all the other same MIDI parts? Okay, so let's say what you could do is, let's say if we have a MIDI part here, okay, and I'll just kind of draw in some notes. So we'll see if this is going to cooperate now. But if you hit, I think it's Control K as you duplicate events, this may come back, but just for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and exit it. Bear with me just a second, and I'll get this. So we'll show you the trick. So you could do what's called like a shared copy. So I will just kind of show this quickly to show you. So as soon as you go to do a particular copy of an event, I will come here and let's just add a quick instrument track. So it's a retro log. All right, and let's say I just have notes that are randomly going up here. All right, so now when I select this particular event, if I hit, I think it's Control K, Control or Command K, we'll see, we'll repeat events. So let's say I want, 10 repetitions, and I click on Shared Copies. So now when I come over here, we'll see that these two horizontal lines indicate that that's a shared event. And so if I go to this particular event and we just reverse the MIDI notes, so we'll just come here and let's reverse the MIDI notes, that you'll see that the MIDI notes in all the subsequent events have updated based upon edits based on the original part. So just hit Control or Command plus K as you make the copies. So we just see about the tape stops. It says, yeah, but when I want longer tape stops, it doesn't work. And this is going back to loop mash. But if one of the things you could do in loop mash is, let's say if we go to the loop mash FX, so there are different rhythmic patterns for timing. So try changing it to like a quarter note drop here. But you have different rhythmic timing, so you could make it last 4 times as long for different tape stops. Okay, so we have a question. I want all my project's audio files to start with the same characters, like my song -audio 01. but in my projects, the audio events file names are not organized this way. Is there a way to rename all audio events file names to specific characters? I could write. Okay, so let's say if I'm going to come here, let's add a number of audio tracks. Okay, so we have 16 audio tracks, and we'll call these audio 01 through 16. And let's say I just wanted to call these Tiago audio 01 through, and put the word Tiago in front of all. So I'm going to select all of these events. Let's go to the project logical editor. And as we come over here to the project logical editor, okay, so we could say I want to, and we will choose transform as our process, and we'll say I want to do this to container type equals track, and we'll just choose our property. We could do this for selected tracks if we wanted to. And then on our transform actions, we just want to name, and then we can prepend, and let's just say Tiago. I think this may do the trick. And I'll leave a space. So let's say if we come here, so now all of these can be renamed to Tiago. And then if you wanted to rename the events, you could just come over here, and as you have audio on there, you can just rename the events that way as well. So give that a try. And let's see if we could do this. So let's say if we have events here. So this next question. So let's say we want to rename the events. I'll put all these into a folder track really quickly. And let's say we're going to create events. Okay, so these are all going to be called audio 01 through 16. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to, I think we could maybe even rename events using the same functionality. And this is something that Nuendo does quite well. So let's say, so I'm just going to say, let's take the events here and apply the name. So Tiago audio 02. So you could just do the same concept for naming tracks or events based on what you have set as the container type. So try that. Okay. All right, let's move on. So thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we have a question. Hello from Montreal, Greg. What's the website with all the live stream Q&A on it? Thank you. So I think you're probably asking about cubaseindex.com. So Jan from Stockholm does that. So I just see Greg from Jeff Sabowski question that MIDI bass part had the dynamics articulation track exposed with each and every one of those notes manipulated with its variations individually. So I don't think that each articulation was automatically done. It may have just been like how that particular preset that I loaded up may have done some of the switching, and some of the notes may have triggered key switches to different articulations. See, Gareth is also a fan of the Kate Bush records that Del Palmer did, so I don't think Kate's done any bad work. I think everything she does is fascinating. So, but I thought he had a lot of great contributions to her projects. And Michael Teams also saying the guy in Renaissance, yeah, he was also quite good. Michael Teams also mentioning Chris Squires. Yeah, I got to meet him backstage at a Yes concert once. So I'm friends with Alan White of Yes. So, and no Rick Wakeman as well. All right, just reading through comments. All right, so it says from Jeff Sabowski, I need a classical style orchestral bass drum as a sample in my score. All the searches, I imagine I want to kick drum. I do not. I've been searching incorrectly. So I think if you wanted to do that, Jeff, and I know you have the, let's just go ahead and open it up here. So let's say, so since you have Iconica, but I think if you search for in percussion and Iconica, let's see if I may have to update my Hallion 6. That might be the one that's causing problems here. But, you know, look under in percussion for Iconica. Okay, here we go. So let's get to Iconica sections and players and go to drum and percussion. All right, let me just look, see if it's maybe on ensembles. Let's go to percussion map here. And let me just make sure we hear this. Sorry about that. So just try on the percussion map of Iconica Ensembles. So just a very, the B0. And you could probably maybe find it in just the sections and players. Maybe under toms. Let's just try this. But yeah, just try the Iconica Ensembles and the percussion map and go to B0. All right. Then it won't be the typical 808 type of kick drum sample. All right, so we see Paul Clara just saying, "You're the best, Greg. These live streams are great." So I'm glad it's helpful for people. Okay, Gareth wants people to articulate the like. All right, Michael Teams is granted me and the family 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. Thank you very much. I'll look forward to it and help my voice after the live stream. Let's see how we're doing on time. So we're doing pretty well. Okay, so I see a question. I have Cubase 11. My question is: the folder track doesn't color itself, and in the inspector is off. All right, so say if we add a folder track here. Okay, so as soon as I just come to the folder track, it looks like we could just kind of change the colors just like that. If you don't see the inspector for some reason, maybe if you just click on this icon in the upper right hand corner, you could expose the inspector. But if you just kind of click directly there, you could also, I think if you select the event, go to the color tool, and now you could just change the color of the selected folder track that way as well. Okay, so I just see from Gareth, what are your favorite bass amps, Greg? So I started off, I had a Sun Beta bass. That was my first amp, and it was fine when I was like 14 or so. Then I moved to an Ampeg V4B. I bought one from a friend of mine for $125, and it's just a magic gem of an amp. So that's kind of my workhorse amp. I don't take it out. When I was gigging, I was taking out Ampeg BA 115s, and then I had upgraded to an Ampeg BA 115 version 2. So I'm kind of an Ampeg guy for amps. So always served me well. And now they're owned by Yamaha, so even better. I see Cubase Junkie saying there's a bass amp that came out, Plug-in Alliance, let people have it free. I think it was normally a $200 amp. Yeah, I really like also the, if you go to the VST bass amp, and I could be kind of snobby with bass amps and especially kind of Ampeg tones. And I have like an Ampeg, the SCR DI box. I have like the rack mount Ampeg preamp, the Made in USA one. that's really hard to find these days. But if you go to distortion and check out the VST, not the amp rack, but the VST bass amp, this is a wonderful bass amp for if you want kind of the classic Ampeg tone. That's really good. So check that out. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. All right, my chat field just jumped to me, so let me just... So we see question, in Very Audio, can I draw in a pitch correction, say draw in vibrato for an extended note, like how you can in other tools? So we can't, in Very Audio, you don't have the ability of drawing in vibrato. And I usually joke that I've never had to draw in vibrato, but I've had to take it out a lot. So, but Very Audio doesn't have the capability of drawing in vibrato. So, okay, so I just see from Best Green Jesus, he doesn't know where his snap points are. So let's see if we could take a quick look at it before we go through some of the questions that were mailed in. See if we could find. So let's say if I just go to this point, my snap point just always seems to be turned on. So I'm not sure if it was a change. Let's see if we. Just trying to see where. Because I think it was like a little icon that was enabled here that had like two almost handles. So let me just see if it's. So I'll see if I could do some research on it over the weekend, but it just seems to kind of automatically be on every time I've looked at it on my end. So we see that there's 117 likes so far, so thank you for all the likes. Let's go ahead and move to some of the questions that were sent in so I don't run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for wonderful questions. All right. All right, so we had this question about how to open more than one key editor at a time. Okay, so let's say, all right, so I have a Hallian part here. All right, and let's say I just have a bunch of notes that are painted in. Okay, and I will go ahead and let's duplicate this track. Okay, and I wanted to take these notes and just reverse them. All right, so if we want to see, so a lot of times when we double click, we could see kind of one event editor at a time. And there's a preference. So if we come over here to preferences, and I think if we go to editors, we could say, and this is usually checked, the editor content follows event selection. So uncheck that. And now what we could do is just come over here and say, okay, I want this as a standalone edit screen. And if I want to see other parts, so I'll come here. Let's look at this particular event. All right, so I'll have this. And let's say I want to now look at this event. And I will move this over here. Let's open up and play with some different windows. So if you have multiple screens, this is always helpful. That now we could see kind of both multiple key editors open as you do this. So again, the trick is to go to your preferences, go to editors, and uncheck editor content follows event selection. All right, let me just open up another project here. Okay, so it says a question. Came across an edit function I cannot get back to. I'm on Nuendo 11 on a PC using the video follows edit. In the main window, I could click on an object event and a small diamond would show up. Under the object, after I clicked on a diamond, a small horizontal fader would show up just for that particular object. I could then click on it and a cursor line would show up inside of the object. I could then use the fader to scroll around inside, but just that object. There would be no sound, like a scrub, exactly what I was looking for. I could then press Control-Alt-P to set the snap point. I cannot get that diamond to show under the object up anymore. I could do it before, but I just don't know how to get it to work. So I don't recall any particular edit function like that. So I don't know if it was, maybe there's two events that were on top of each other and you could do this. I know that you could just kind of, so I don't recall like a fader being here. I know that you could, move the cursor anywhere that you want it. And then if you go to the audio menu, you could say snap point to cursor, and then that's where the snap point will be for that particular event. But I don't remember any diamond and like a little fader kind of popping up in versions of Nuendo. I'll see if I could dig through some and find, maybe previous references to that. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I posted this question in a forum and have no responses. I'm running Cubase 12 Pro in Windows 10. I would like to know if it's possible to record CC automation data into an existing part using track quick controls. The online manual states recording in Midi editors. You can record MIDI data and the Midi part is opened in the Midi editor. Prerequisite, you have selected merge or replace as the Midi record mode. Procedure, click in the editor so that the editor gets focused. In the Midi editor toolbar, activate record in editor. Do one of the following to activate recording. Click on record in the transport or in the toolbar. Says my purpose is to have the Midi part adjust real-time parameters in a hardware synth when the Midi part plays back. I set up the recording as described above while the track. In the keys editor's re-recording, I can adjust real-time parameters and hear the effects manipulating them, but after I stop and record and check the keys editor, the show used MIDI controller is only velocity displays. And of course, upon playback, the MIDI part, none of the parameter movements are replicated. Is this a routing issue or simply not possible to merge the recorded to record the CC manipulations of of the track quick controls. Okay, so let's say we wanted to come over to maybe like a synth bass part here. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to record this data here, so I'm just going to move my mod wheel up and down, and we will record. So let's say I just have a all right, so I just have a part, and now while I'm in the editor, I wanted to record like my modulation wheel. So I will come over here and record the modulation wheel. So as we play, and it'll just show up directly. All right, so now I want to record quick controls. Now, once we do quick controls, it's not actually capturing the MIDI data in the part. So we're not going to see quick controls here, because what quick controls are is going to be showing up as automation data. So I'm going to select this event. Let's go to our quick controls. We can see that these quick controls will automatically be populated directly here for the first 8 parameters. And we could adjust the particular parameters quite easily when we go into an instrument. And again, clicking on a QC, we could just say, okay, as we click on the QC here, we could select a particular parameter and assign that for the quick control. But you notice that as I record quick controls, that often, we don't want to, when we're working with quick controls, we don't record it into the MIDI editor, because while we control the quick controls through MIDI, what we're actually doing is automating the particular parameter. So if I wanted to come here, I'm going to automate and record enable write automation on the quick controls. So as I come over here, I could so when we look in our modulation data, we don't see any MIDI CCs for those particular things, because they're actually all recorded as quick controls in modulation. So if you want it to be populated in the particular MIDI event, what you'd want to do is just to be able to, learn a CC control and do that from your controller, as opposed to using quick controls, because the quick controls are actually not recording MIDI data. It's recording an automatable parameter that shows up in the automation lanes that are controlled. So we're having MIDI control 8 quick controls that are, transmitting and controlling 8 different parameters on the synthesizer, but it's not recording it as MIDI CC data. It's just recording it as automation. So try automating your quick controls, or if you don't want it to be quick controls and you want it to be resident within the part, don't use quick controls, because the quick controls are going to be just for showing up, will just be reflected in automation. Okay, we covered that one already. Okay, so I have a question. I have a number of hardware synths that are connected to a little submixer before going into my sound card. I'd like to set up external instruments in Cubase, but a few obviously share the same submixer, and so the same inputs to my sound card. Cubase won't let me select the same device ports on external instruments, so I'm unable to set things up, and I realize that sharing inputs would be a compromise when it comes to adding effects or bouncing down, but I seem to recall that you created some dummy buses for something similar to this on a live stream once. I can create multiple buses, sharing inputs within the audio connections window. Is it possible to do the same thing with external instruments? So when we're working with external instruments, ideally you'd want for each instrument for it to be set up in its own unique channels, so that we have the capability to capture it and then run it through different effects. What I have in my system, I have like older Mackie LM3204, so I have 2 of them. So I have 64 line level inputs and another 16. So I have like 84 inputs and 10 rack spaces. So, and if you hit the Alt 3 4 bus, what you could do is when you go to your audio connections, instead of defining the particular instrument, when we go to external instruments, what we could do is I would just perhaps create one here and just say, okay, I wanted to add an external instrument. So let's just call this like capture. Or like on my Mackie, it's the Alt 3 4 bus. Okay, so, and let's say, okay, I wanted to have one stereo return. So now what I could do is anytime that I wanted to record a particular instrument, I could just have all of my instruments that are going into the project. I don't have the ability to combine, within Cubase to break them apart. So if I have like 3 instruments that are all being bussed out to one stereo output, I could record and capture them all within my Alt 3 4 bus. But, for Cubase to do this effectively, what some people will do is just, when you want to transfer it as audio, is just simply come over and have, either do it one at a time or just do the mix, on the particular audio output, do the mix on the external mixer and then capture just a stereo recording of that. So if you wanted the ability to break everything apart to different, to different inputs, you would need an audio interface that would allow you to do that. So let's say if I just wanted to come here, we could say, okay, let's say I want to do my Modi X, and we'll say, okay, let's do your Steinberg. So you could just come over here and, just the nature of the beast when dealing with external is that it wants to be able to, if you freeze a track and then the intention is if you frozen a track or captured a track and then you got rid of the freeze file, it still wants the same routing defined. So that your project will play back if you got rid of a frozen file because the input connection was always present. So there isn't a way to kind of share the inputs. So, and that's why, and it's just the nature of working with external Midi. So you could just capture it as audio in real time, which a lot of people will do, or just, be able to just, capture the entire, like a mix of all your different MIDI instruments, or record them one at a time if you need the separation for processing and effects. Okay. Okay, so we answered the next question already. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a Cubase keyboard mat with shortcuts to speed up the workflow and functionality of the DAW? So I'm sure that there's probably like a mouse pad. I know at one point Steinberg had mouse pads with keyboard shortcuts and keyboard stickers that were available. Sometimes those change and customers will get upset because a keyboard shortcut changes and, they're not, in their keyboard shortcut mat. I'm sure that there's people that have made them, but, I would, always suggest that you try to work, and just work on getting keyboard shortcuts in muscle memory. So maybe in the Cubase Nation Discord, there might be a link to a mat, but Steinberg, I don't think, makes one anymore, but it was kind of like a promotional item that they would use to give away at trade shows. All right, question. What is the difference between Melodyne and Very Audio? I think functionally I'm not a Melodyne expert, but that will allow you to kind of break apart audio that's polyphonic. there's varying degrees of success with it, and Melodyne obviously costs a lot of money, and Very Audio is tightly integrated into Cubase, and also is free with Cubase and with Cubase Pro and Cubase Artist. Okay, question. Let's say I have a loop set from measure X to X. When I press stop, I want the cursor to go back to the beginning of the loop for me to listen and continue editing the track. What are the steps for me to establish the parameters for this task? Okay, so let's say if we have a loop here, I think if we hit, is it Alt-P? That you could just play. You could have that loop automatically play, and then depending on your transport. So let's say if we start here, I hit 1 to go to the locator on my numeric keypad, 2 to go to the right locator, 1 to the left locator. So learn those keyboard shortcuts. But if we have this set to in preferences, let's say if I have the transport set to return to start position on stop under transport there, that when I hit play, so if I have a loop selection, I could hit Alt-P, Alt or Option P, and then when I stop, it goes right back to that particular point. So just hit the space bar. It'll take me right to the beginning of that loop. So give that a try. Okay, question. In creating what is considered a musical album, would you explain in detail the hierarchy from top to bottom or bottom to top? Album done in songs or songs completed, album in the form of a Cubase Pro project. A lot of times what people will do is take if they're going to be mastering kind of within Cubase, is they will treat like an album project is more of a linear function as opposed to like top to bottom or bottom to top. So let's say if I had an album, and people would want to kind of visualize it because, people will often listen to it in a linear manner. So where you have song 1 and let's say song 2, song 3, 4, etc. So let's say we come here, So most people I know would kind of come over here and treat it more linearly. So mastering programs, would have this so you could see the time as opposed to having all of these stacked vertically. So, and that's how like mastering programs like Wavelab will be set up to work. All right, so we have a question. Is there an option for numbering every measure in the Cubase score editor instead of numbering the start of at the beginning of each staff? So let's take a look. I think we could do that. So I'm going to add a quick instrument track. I'll just... All right, so I'm going to just switch this to bars and beats, and let's go to my score editor. All right, so I'm going to take this into page mode. All right, so we can see that we have like measures 2. We'll zoom in just a little bit here. So 2, 6, 10, 14, etc. So if we want our measures to be on every measure, or bar numbers to be on every measure. So let's go to our score settings. And I'm going to just access that by double clicking to the left. Okay, let's go to our notation style. Let me just... Okay, so let's go to notation style. And I think we'll see bar numbering. So let's say show every, and I think if you just scroll here, let's say every 1 bar. So I'm just using my mouse scroll wheel to change the value. So you could have it first, but let's change it to 1 bar, hit apply, and then you could see the measure numbers on every single measure. So once again, go to the score settings, go to project, to notation style, scroll down to bar numbers, and where it says first bar number to bar line or show every, just simply switch that from first to 1 bar. So all right. So we have a question. Would you explain the best input level for recording through a UR816C? I read in the manual that your meter should slightly illuminate red meter light on the UR816C. Input meter, please provide your take on the best input level to use when you have a very hot signal, but still have the room to adjust for input gain level up or down. So that's a pretty good it's a pretty good reference point, you know. So I like to go where it's red, and then inevitably, as people are recording, you say, "Oh, play as loud as you're going to play." And even if you're engineering yourself, you lie to yourself. And I remember even recording, you know, doing an Alan Parsons project, live concert recording, and you know, they're like, "This is as loud as we're going to play for our levels." And right, I'm like, "You're not going to get louder as the concert goes on and there's a crowd here." It's like, no, this is as loud as we're going to play. And then, you know, throughout this set, you know, it went up like almost like 8 dB. So I would be conservative with levels, especially if it's like a live recording where it's just going to happen once. So I would try to make sure that as you're recording, that the loudest that you're going to play doesn't hit the red. And I think that's a pretty good level. You know, and if you have to pad for really loud sources, you know, do that. But you could always make up gain easily afterwards. But if you have to take gain away, that could be a lot harder. Okay, so we had a question. Thank you for your great Cubase tips. Last week I saw your workflow with the comp tool at the lanes. My question, how are the workflow solutions to make crossfades between several takes with the lanes, maybe of a drum recording? So let's take a look. Okay, so we're doing okay on time. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. So let me just go to same principle will apply here. Okay, so if I have a number of lanes here, and let's say I've done comping, all right, so let's say if I wanted to do like a crossfade, I'm just going to select kind of this particular range. I'm going to use my range tool and then just hit the letter A. And then you could see that it will just automatically, you know, often you're not really doing crossfades because you're going to have one event kind of playing back. But if you had to do like, you know, short fades between sections, you could just kind of come right over here. And if you wanted to zoom in and just set up, you know, Cubase does have, you know, when we come over here, Cubase does have this auto fade settings that will be on playback. You may not see it visually, but if I wanted to just take my snap off and say, okay, I just want it like a very tight crossfade between those, select it with the range tool, and then you can just hit the A button on your computer keyboard, and that will do fade outs and fade ins based on your range. Okay, so we had a question. I think this might have been from Tiago. I'm not sure if this question came in. and we covered this before, but I'll go over it again. In the last live stream, I asked if it would be possible to add multiple cues for different mix snapshots for my choir studies, or for my choir, I guess my choir studies. You said to create the mix snapshots for different voices, but this was not my main question. I meant to ask if it would be possible after creating those different mix snapshots to add each mix snapshot for a single render queue process, so I can render all the different mix snapshots in one step. So currently, you would have to manually load the snapshot. So the snapshot isn't really intended for different states within the particular, within the export queue, because a lot of times the mix console snapshots don't employ automation. So that wasn't really the intended purpose. So it doesn't work where the different snapshots can be accessed from queues. You could change that and then, one by one do the particular queues. Okay, we covered that question already. Okay, so we have a question. What is the best way to save custom presets from different VST instruments, Contact, Omnisphere, Zebra, etc. in one place so they could be stored, auditioned from one folder regardless of which VST instrument has been used? Is it to create track presets with VST instrument sound, or is there a smarter way? So each company may have their own proprietary unique formats that, could be used across different platforms. So I think if you want it to be one centralized location, that track presets are a good way for that. All right, and I think it's the last question. If I increase the level volume using the fader in all tracks, quick link, say 5 dB, several of the tracks have send effects. Can the FX faders in the same position before volume increase of 5 dB in all tracks, or do I need to readjust this? So one of the things that you could do with your send effects is to just come over here, and if we have a send effect, let's say I will come over here. And if you run into this, is when we go to the send effect, is you could change it to be, pre-fader. So as you add effects, that as you adjust like the fader of the channel, that particular send effect isn't affected. So if it's post fader, as you adjust the fader here, so, you could just come to your effects ends and just move to post fader, move to pre-fader on a send by send basis. All right, so with that, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for a wonderful live stream. Thank you for all the questions. We will be back on Tuesday of next week, and next Friday we will do our Zoom meetup. So if you haven't done that, it's a wonderful way to meet other users that are on the live stream, and it's always just fascinating discussions. I love the monthly Zoom meetup, so we hope to see everyone there. I want to make sure everyone has a wonderful and safe weekend, and everyone stay safe and healthy, and we will see everyone on Tuesday. Thank you.